Hello, viewers, and welcome to the latest episode of the Huddle. I have with us an old friend, Duncan Garvie, founder of BetBlocker and head of ADR at Blexr. Duncan, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Tom. Great to be with you.
Yeah, looking forward to speaking to you again. You've appeared in kind of Trafficology and Gambling Insider before. Yeah. Plenty to say about the industry, plenty for us to talk about. Maybe to start off with, just reflect on the last year for BetBlocker because a lot has happened.
Oh, the last 12 months for BetBlocker are absolutely huge. Between myself and our Chief of Safer Gambling Partnerships, Pedro Romero, we've put in a lot of work trying to raise the profile of the service. For those of your viewers who don't know what we do, we are a charity that provides free blocking software. The work we've done has paid off massively. We've managed to build partnerships with numerous new donors. We were selected as one of the 2 charity partners to receive a donation from ICE London conference this year. We were selected as a charity partner for the Ethical Gambling Forum in May in Gibraltar this year. We actually, just a few weeks ago, we won the Jim Wolfing Prevention Award from the National Council of Problem Gambling in the United States, which was a very exciting development for us. We're really, really happy with that. So we're just finding huge momentum coming into the latter half of 2024, which is great. It's great. We're seeing user numbers are rocketing. We've got our to-do list of features we want to develop that we're currently well funded to achieve, and it's more of a technology bottleneck that's holding things up rather than the standard charity issue of hand to mouth, just get by to the next month.
Mm-hmm. There's a number of roads we can take from here. We're definitely going to talk about the US, and then we can talk about the UK as well. But it's almost we're going to go, I think, quite philosophical quite early on, because you talk about blocking software. Obviously, within the realm of responsible gambling, that's to help people who need it. But conversations we've had before, responsible gambling charities and organizations, it doesn't mean anti-gambling. It's very much acknowledging that people gamble, people like to gamble. But there's people who need the help, and all the industries work together.
We intentionally position ourselves as agnostic on this sort of topic. We are neither pro-gambling, we are not anti-gambling. From a very high-level philosophical point of view, humanity would probably be better off without gambling. We don't actually need it. But stepping out of the realms of a utopian sort of change, which isn't practically or realistically feasible, if gambling is going to exist, then the best way to move forward with that is regulation, appropriate and sensible regulation. So we're certainly not anti-gambling in that respect. And my personal view on things is we have to be careful until we can properly control access to the black markets. We have to make sure that the licensed markets are actually delivering the product that our consumers are looking for. Because if the licensed product stops delivering the experience that our consumers are looking for, consumers will look to the black market. And that's the most dangerous thing that can happen. Especially for the vulnerable sectors of the market that are prone to gambling harms.
I find that we've kind of spoke about this before, and that the way you define it, I think, it is a very good definition, because, as you say, it's not necessarily something gambling you need to do to survive, but at the same time, you could probably level that at a few other industries and products as well. But yeah, but it's human nature, something that's happened for thousands of years, and as you say,
it's no different to drinking. It's no different to driving too fast. Ideally, we shouldn't drive too fast, but it's going to happen. right?
Yeah.
So if it's going to happen, we need to manage it and try and work within the psychological frameworks that will encourage people to engage healthily.
Yeah. And you mentioned you're kind of agnostic on this as well. I know you talked about the award of the NCPG. The NCPG positions itself as gambling neutral as well. I think we can use this as a segue to talk a little bit about the US and responsible gambling in the US. It's not such an easy thing to discuss because it's not the US. It's all the different states in the US and the various different rules. Kind of how's your, I guess, early experience of US and the different states?
I mean, it's a developing market. It's the same as, well. No, I'm gonna adjust that slightly because that doesn't hit the right tone. We are all developing markets. We are all still learning. The fundamental reality, especially when we're talking about online gambling, is that we've opened Pandora's box. Between the internet itself and mobile phones, look, these things have brought in wonderful advancements in technology. Things that we could never have dreamed of 20 years ago are commonplace today. It has made life easier in so many ways, but it's come with drawbacks. The simple facts are that the human brain was never evolved to cope with this level of access to certain activities. It's not just gambling. I mean, porn is another classic example. Shopping, another example. All of these instant access pastimes that we just weren't evolved to cope with. Human behavior wasn't evolved to cope with. We are now, everybody standing on the bus in the morning is 2 clicks away from gambling. It's 10 seconds away from being logged in and playing on your favorite slot machine. Prior to the internet, if you wanted to gamble, it meant going out of your house, traveling to a casino or a poker room or a sports book and placing your wagers. You had a limited time there. With smartphones, there's no limit. And that is something that we are naturally having to acclimatize to. So the most developed markets in the world still haven't got on top of this, still haven't figured out the optimal solution to these issues. The US specifically, the state framework makes it challenging to develop a wider national approach, as you're seeing in more of the European countries. With some states legalized, some states not, other states legalizing specific types of gambling, and there's still work to be done on the culture around responsible gambling, a lot of which is very keyed to the retail industry. For instance, if you look at several of the statewide self-exclusion programs, they require somebody to go into one of the casinos in the state, go to a specific office, bring ID, sign an exclusion notice. The reality of gambling addiction is that it is very impulsive, and the time frame within which we have to move somebody from crisis to excluded, it's a very short window. And you'll notice that within Europe, the national self-exclusion schemes, I think I speak with a natural British bias on this one. But if we look at maybe GamStop, the system has worked very hard to try and make that as accessible and as quick to register for as possible. I think there's still work in the US to be done on statewide bans, and I think I've seen news about this in the last week or so, the creation of a national self-exclusion scheme that I think would be a big step forward. But these sorts of endeavours don't happen overnight. And as I said, the state framework makes it challenging to develop a unified approach.
Yeah.
Though it will get there. It is just going to take time.
Yeah. So the UK isn't perfect, as you say. No developed market has reached a zenith, especially in this area, and that's something we'll discuss. But if there was maybe, and you've mentioned a couple of specific examples there, if there was one or two things a US particular state, like a big state like a New Jersey or New York or something, could take from the UK market in this area and say, right, we want to do that and learn from that, what would be the most important kind of things, sort of takeaways?
Oh, now you're going to make me unpopular. I think some of the biggest things they could do, yes, I think firstly, statewide or a nationwide self-exclusion register would be a big step forward. But I also think a regulator-enforced requirement to contribute something, I'm not saying how much, but to make some contribution to harm prevention organisations on a yearly basis. I know, having spoken to many of the various organisations working in states all across the United States, that there are constant funding challenges. There are small teams working very hard with not very much money. I think naturally, with such a high revenue industry, a little bit more support on that front would be fantastic. But I will hold my hands up here and say, as somebody running a responsible gambling charity, it could be legitimately suggested I have my own skin in that game.
Yeah, I suppose that's fair. So, like you said, we're gonna get where we need to with the US. It's just gonna take a lot of time. If we're to and unfortunately, as much as we'd love to, we can't solve those problems in this interview. So part of the US for a second, and if we're to look at the UK, I mean, obviously, a lot of potential change with the white paper. Perhaps the government at the moment, a new government, have maybe slightly bigger priorities than addressing the white paper right now as of the second. But in terms of where we are with responsible gambling and things like the levy in the UK, where are we in your view?
There's the UK, to my mind, there's a lot of positive thinking. There's the right intention. My personal opinion is it's not always being executed in the right way, but they're working towards the right goals. The levy specifically is creating a lot of uncertainty for the organisations that are delivering the support today. Unfortunately, we don't have clear guidance yet on how that funding will be distributed. We are seeing various organisations within the UK who, for instance, my understanding at the present time is that the NHS will be appointed the Commissioner for Treatment. And the word I'm hearing at the present time is that they have told the third sector that if they've accepted money from the industry, they will not receive money from the levy, which creates a real challenge because every charity effectively in the UK has been accepting funding from the industry. That's creating a lot of instability. You're seeing big changes in the charitable sector. I'm not convinced of the wisdom of that particular move, while I certainly would support it in terms of research. I'm not necessarily convinced that the industry is biasing research, but even the public perception that it is damages the legitimacy of the research. So, of course, we need a firewall between industry funding and research. That's common sense. But as far as prevention and treatment go, I'm far less convinced that industry funding has the ability to tarnish these sectors in any way. I mean, are we honestly suggesting that a treatment provider like Gordon Moody, what do we think that they're doing that's corrupting the treatment that they're delivering? Do we think they're giving out free spins at the end of a treatment session? No, realistically, that's not what's going on. Yeah, that sort of position becomes more about political positioning and righteous signalling than it is about delivering effective treatment to as many people as possible. Alongside the levy, I mean, within the white paper, you're also seeing, for instance, talk of on source of wealth checks and wager limits on various games. Again, I mean, coming from the background of somebody who has worked managing player disputes for well over a decade now, source of wealth checks are very badly received by consumers. It is that simple. And having spoken to multiple operators about this, the dropout rates when source of wealth checks are applied are astronomical. Most players, when a source of wealth check is engaged, most players will simply say, I'm not going to play there anymore. I will go and play somewhere else.
Yeah.
That is understandable. Look, there are times and places where source of wealth checks are legitimately required. But it's about finding a balance. It is about finding a balance. Widespread application of source of wealth checks is not a solution to anything.
Yeah. I was going to ask. So you talk about the kind of the uncertainty and perhaps a lack of execution, and or certainly no, not lack of execution. I think that's the phrase is poor. Not sure how to go about executing these things, and ultimately they're not easy anyway. But a question I'd ask is, compared to perhaps 5-10 years ago, or not specifically that number, just a X point in history, are we seeing, and I'd like to think the answer is yes, a more engaging, more positive attitude from operators when it comes to prevention and responsible gambling. And also I think the Gambling Commission as well, in the sense that it's engaging the industry more now. And I just think there's we've kind of a little bit more of a middle ground in the UK today.
Look, from an anecdotal place, yes, definitely. The industry has come forward massively. I've been running BetBlocker since 2017. I've been managing player complaints since 2011. And the tone of the conversation has changed substantially. Even within the UK market, even if you want to look within the last few years, and I can give you a direct example. If we look at TV advertising before, during, and after COVID lockdown, there has been a marked shift in the tone of advertising. When lockdown came into force, the Gambling Commission put in place restrictions stipulating that operators could no longer advertise gambling. The industry response to that was to pivot. They still advertised, they just took out the gambling elements of their advertisement and started talking about their self-exclusion tools, or timeout features, about all the ways that players could manage their play. When those restrictions were lifted, the industry did not completely pivot back. Yes, it's brought some advertisement of bonuses and bets again, but most advertisement on TV also includes significant amounts of, at least in my experience, I don't have the data to back this up, but from my day-to-day engagement with TV, I see far more signposting of responsible gambling tools. And that shows the mindset has shifted within the sector. At least in the UK, it is no longer perceived as wasted money to spend money in educating players about how to stay safe when they're gambling. So, I mean, roll back to 2014, and no gambling operator would have even considered that.
Yeah.
So that is a significant mindset shift. The Gambling Commission, look, I have a lot of sympathy for the Gambling Commission in a lot of ways. They have a tough job, as do all regulators. The truth is that they are caught somewhere between a rock and a hard place. The press, the mainstream media, will almost always be negative towards the gambling industry. The cynical truth of the matter is that the outrage story plays far better and drives clicks far better than anything else. So the press will always ride the regulator, and the regulator has to appear to take a robust position on protecting consumers, but at the same time has to ensure that the industry thrives. That's a tightrope to walk. That's not an easy position to occupy, and we're all learning. Every organisation in this sector is still evolving, changing, and developing. So I mean, the regulator is adapting as it tries one strategy, thinks that, and actually the recent survey on gambling in the UK, Gambling Survey GB, is a perfect example of that. There's been massive methodology changes, and these have resulted in some stark divergences from the previous NHS survey. Now, I want to be very careful around this one, because the methodology changes mean that the figures aren't actually comparable, and we need more data before we can draw proper conclusions. But my point there is simply we've assessed the previous strategy, we have established what we think we can do to improve, and we have changed methodology. And this will not be the last change in methodology on this front. It is a complex matter to engage with the population about any vice activity. People are very cagey about admitting or openly discussing how much they drink or gamble or anything else that they feel a sense of embarrassment about. So we're going to have to keep changing strategies, and it's important to never think that we have reached the perfect outcome. We never will. We are both human ourselves, and we're operating within a human system. It is always about adapting, changing, and improving.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, I personally think Andrew Rhodes, deserves credit, and Tim Miller and these guys for engaging with the industry. And I think the survey is an interesting example, because I think I saw a lot of examples of how it might have been perceived. So some mainstream media outlets, just completely misinterpreting the data and saying problem gambling has suddenly risen hugely, and perhaps some commentators saying, the Gambling Commission did this and this methodology is questionable. But I think crucially, the Gambling Commission was very open and honest and said, look, we've had this independent review. It's not perfect. We're changing the methodology, and we're just going to be very clear about it. So I don't think they necessarily did anything wrong in the sense of that the numbers changed, but they were very open about it.
I couldn't agree with you more. I would criticize both sides of this particular argument. I would criticize any media outlet who has taken those figures, and despite the clear disclaimers telling them what they should not do with these figures, have run ahead and looked to represent the figures showing a massive rise in problem gambling. I would also criticise the other side, though, in that there were numerous groups clamouring that these figures should never have been published. I think from a PR perspective, that would have been an absolute disaster. The moment that a news outlet, a media outlet, got hold of the fact that the Gambling Commission decided not to publish the survey on gambling because it possibly indicated an increase, that would have become a far bigger scandal story.
Yeah,
it is far better to go the line that the Commission went with that and to publish the data with clear notes saying we're trying a new methodology. That's why it's not comparable to the previous methodology. Work in progress. This is still valuable data. It is still useful data. Hiding it was not the answer.
Yeah, again, right back at you. I couldn't really agree more. Plenty of topics. We've covered plenty more. I'm sure we'll speak again and we'll discuss, but I wanted to throw one more at you. And actually, again, kind of opening up to you, because obviously you mentioned your work with ADR at Blexr as well, and you've got a history in kind of dispute resolution. Quite generally, in terms of that side of your work, what's the latest there? Maybe not any particular stories, but, kind of in terms of how regulation is changing and things like that. What's the latest in that department?
There's less change going on there. Within the UK, there's certainly change on the horizon. In other jurisdictions, it's slower. The MGA Malta has a fairly well-established ADR system. It's not perfect, but it's a lot more effective than requiring consumers to go to the courts for an answer. The reality is the vast majority of consumers would never consider that. Having an ADR, even an imperfect one, is a better option. There's discussion of Curacao, the Gambling Control Board, implementing an ADR system when their licensing conditions come into place. Waiting to see what happens there. I know that's about the extent of my knowledge of what's going on that front. The UK, there's currently within the white paper discussion of setting up an ombudsman. Now, I don't necessarily think that's a bad idea, but I have some reservations about it. Specifically, that if you look at other ombudsman-based services in the UK, they are taking far, far longer to resolve claims than the ADR system that's currently in place.
I know ombudsman is something that in the UK has been mooted for
a long time now.
Yeah,
a long time now. I feel that for consumers, many of whom are looking for a fast answer, if we start talking about, without naming any particular institution, I can say that one ombudsman in the UK, it's an average of 3 months before your complaint will even be assigned to a complaint handler. Now, within the ADR system, ADRs are expected to have your case reviewed, finished within 3 months. I have concerns that switching to an ombudsman service could result in lots of needless delays on simple claims. That said, there's a huge gaping hole in the ADR system, and that relates to responsible gambling related claims, problem gambling related claims. Currently, ADRs in the UK are prohibited from taking on non-transactional cases, and the definitions given effectively rule out managing the majority of responsible gambling-related claims. What this means, I mean, ADR as a system was set up, was intended to give consumers a more easily accessed means of raising a dispute without having to go to court. When we exclude responsible gambling claims from the ADR system, what that means is we've taken the most vulnerable subsection of consumers, the subsection of consumers that are least likely to be able to afford to take something to court, and told them you can't access the easier system. You have to go to court if you want to get this reviewed. That's a big problem to my mind. That's an unacceptable gap in the system. My hope going forward would be that an ombudsman will be established, but rather than replacing the current ADR system, it will be established to sit above the current ADR system. It will take some careful wording and some clever minds to construct the system properly, but to put in place the ombudsman to manage more complicated claims, perhaps claims over a certain value or claims relating to problem gambling, while the ADRs sit below and manage the lower level claims that are quicker and easier to process. And by having this sort of two-tier system, we can both deliver fast, agile outcomes for consumers, and we can have a higher level review for cases that require that.
Let's hope moving forward we can get it right. And Duncan, pleasure speaking with you. Thanks for your time. Like I said, we covered a lot, and I feel like there's a lot more we can cover, but maybe we'll save it for next time.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you again, Tim.
Likewise. Thanks for your time, and to our viewers, thanks for watching as well.
Bye for now.